Now at this point, we must understand something about Aristotle. He's not rejecting the common notion of happiness. Because if he was rejecting it, then he would be rejecting the idea that we even have a grasp of what is good. And he doesn't think that. He just thinks we need to be more careful, that the common notion is confused and confusing several different senses of the word eudaimonia. And for us, we confuse several different senses of the word happiness. When we say, I want to live a happy life, we could either be meaning that we want to feel good or that we want to live good, to put it ungrammatically. So we confuse the feeling good with living well. And he says, when we examine this closely and look analytically about what we actually prefer, we see that the two are different, that fulfillment and let's just call the feeling good happiness for short, and happiness are not necessarily the same thing. To illustrate this, I give you an example of two different lives. And again, these don't look at the details of their lives because, of course, no life is completely or purely an example of an ideal. But imagine I gave you a choice before I sent you to Earth. Say I'm God, and I give you this choice. I say, okay, Troy, I'm going to give you a choice between two different types of lives. The Hugh Hefner kind of life or the Mother Teresa kind of life. The Hugh Hefner kind of life, well, you know what that means. This is the life of the playboy. This is the life of the person who is wealthy and famous and has as much pleasure as they want and all the pleasure that they love. This might be, again, the highlight. So let's not pay attention to whether Hugh Hefner did other good things in life. Let's just pretend that I'm just going to give you the enjoyable part of Hugh Hefner's life. You become this person who has unlimited access to all pleasures. And let's also stipulate that in this life, you just do nothing great. You help no other people. You don't need to. You just enjoy the life of pleasure. You have the bling, and you have everything that comes along with that. So there you are. That's the one life I can give you. It really is no different, Aristotle would say, than someone who has very rich parents who then doesn't have to work. They get to buy all the drugs they want and sleep in their parents' basement and play video games for their whole life and eat Cheetos, if that's what they like. So you have that life, okay? And we guarantee that in this life there will be no suffering. That's the one choice you have. The other choice is a life of suffering, isn't it? This is the life of someone like Mother Teresa or Dietrich Bonhoeffer. For some of you might know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a very famous Lutheran Christian who before World War II realized that Hitler was going to destroy all the Jews and he could live safely in the United States. He had a great academic position. He was quite a smart man. He was offered a position at NYU. And he chose consciously, knowing Hitler would arrest him, to go back to Germany to help save Jews. And he became a major conduit, like Schindler, for Jews to escape Germany and escape the Holocaust. But eventually he himself got caught and put into a concentration camp. And at the very end of World War II, the day before Dachau was liberated, where he was hanged with fish wire and tortured and killed. So these are the two lives you have a choice to live. The Hugh Hefner life, the life of the pig in mud, or the life of someone who suffers, but in that suffering does a great amount of good. Which would you choose? Aristotle thinks it's obvious that we admire people like Mother Teresa and Dietrich Bonhoeffer and other great men and women. And because we admire them, we want to be like them. And so therefore, if we were to really think about it, we would choose the life of fulfillment over and above the life of just pure pleasure. He's not saying that we don't want pleasure. What he's saying is if we had to choose between the life of pleasure and the life of fulfillment, we couldn't have both. We would choose, we hope we would choose the life of fulfillment. Let's bring this more to home. Think of 9/11. Think of the firefighters and police officers who ran into the burning building of the Twin Towers to rescue people who they didn't know. Do we admire them? Yes, we call them heroes, don't we? They lived very short lives. They died leaving children and wives and husbands alone to suffer after them. But they did a great thing, didn't they? Did they live successful lives? Would we say their life was a waste because they saved many lives and sacrificed their own and therefore lived a shorter life of suffering? No, Aristotle says. Aristotle says we look up to them as heroes and call them by the title hero to indicate that their lives were successful, that they did achieve eudaimonia, even though it was not the same as the life of pleasure. And so therefore he tells us if we look closely at our common notion, we will see that there's an ambiguity there, but what we're really seeking after in eudaimonia, in happiness, is fulfillment, to live an excellent life, not necessarily a life of enjoyment or pleasure or having fun or feeling good. The two aren't necessarily the same. So therefore, what is presupposed in that? What is the content of that? If we can live a great life, this presupposes some kind of standard, doesn't it? Some kind of standard for what it is to be human, and therefore some goal written into our very nature. But if we're natural beings, how is that possible? Things that are made, like this pen, we already know what it takes to be a good pen because these things are constructed with goals in mind. But are humans like this? Can humans have a goal? If we can, if that goal is written to our very nature, then we have a standard for fulfillment, don't we? We have a standard of what it means to live a fulfilling life, i.e. a life that fulfills the goal that is common and natural to all humans. And therefore, we have an objective notion of the good and not simply a feeling.